And welcome back to the show. Well, while COVID-19 continues to impact the hunger crisis in New York City, the Bronx is bearing the brunt of the blow with the higher unemployment rates and food insecurity than any of the 5 boroughs. The inability to afford nutritious and sufficient food inevitably leads to unhealthy and imbalanced diets, which over time can result in poor health and also lifestyle diseases such as diabetes. Our next guest continues to advocate for working people, dedicating his time during the pandemic to addressing the staggering food insecurity issues in the 32nd District and coordinating donations and delivery of PPE to communities across the Bronx. Joining me to provide his point of view on the matter, I am joined by the New York State Senator of District 32, Louis Sepúlveda, and we thank you so much for joining us, Senator Sepúlveda.
Thank you for having me on a great program. Looking forward to your questions and giving you good information from the community in the 32nd Senate District.
Well, listen, we want to get front and center with what's going on in the 32nd because as we talk about COVID and we're, closer to the other side than we ever have been. But give me a little bit of an analysis of where your district is now in the COVID crisis.
Well, just like most of the Bronx, unfortunately, our numbers are not equivalent to the numbers you have in wealthier districts. We're still behind in terms of overall vaccination. But our numbers have gotten better due to large parts of many efforts of people throughout our community, elected officials. Now, I can tell you, for one, that my office, my staff, we went into overdrive when the vaccination program began. And we ourselves are directly responsible for vaccinating over 1,500 people in the 32nd Senate District. Our numbers were hovering about 2% in a certain area. We got it over past 11% now. And I think that's a reflection of the work that myself and other elected officials have done. Certainly the mayor, I have been tugging at the mayor and the governor's office for days on end, every single day, either for PPEs. We gave out over 50,000 face masks since March of last year, tugging them every which way to make sure that we were ready for the issues that we have in the Bronx, because, we are 62 out of 62 in health indicators. No matter what happens, we're still the worst on healthcare metrics. And so knowing that when the city of New York gets a cold, the Bronx gets pneumonia, we went into overdrive and we started working to protect people and went into warp speed when we found out about the vaccine. So I think we're getting better. We still have a lot more work to do, but certainly where we began and where we are now, it's been like night and day. And I'm grateful for a lot of community people, a lot of healthcare organizations, churches, and elected officials in our community.
What are you saying by way of vaccine hesitancy? As you know, in communities of color, there is that hesitancy in really trying to find those persons to be vaccinated. What's been your takeaway?
It's been positive. You still have people, including people in my own family, who have refused to take the vaccine despite all the medical information you provide. I know that in the African American community, there is fear because of Tuskegee experiments. And it's interesting. I sat on a forum with a local church that had a doctor from Howard University who was speaking about the veracity of some of the things you hear about the Tuskegee experiments. And one of the things that he told us that he said was important was that the Tuskegee individuals that were essentially used like guinea pigs, they weren't infected with syphilis. What happened was that they had it, and as part of the experiment, they weren't treated. So that, and the important dichotomy there is that it's, the fear that someone's going to inject you with something is something that we have to overcome to make sure that we get vaccinated. I also think the public relations campaign of many high-level, social media individuals, athletes, actors, educators, all that together, I think is immensely helpful to our objective, which is to get everyone vaccinated so that we can hit herd immunity.
I want to go and talk a little bit on the topic about food insecurity, another large issue that has really affected and become further exacerbated throughout the course of the pandemic. How you saw food insecurity in your district? I mean, we already had a population of unemployed and somewhat hungry people. Now you add on COVID-19 and we've got an extra problem.
Oh, well, look, food insecurity, health indicator metrics, all that is a result of a complexity of problems, institutional racism, systemic racism that our county has dealt with when we weren't within the wheels of power in a position to be able to bring funding and more resources to our communities. That's changing slowly. I think there's too much inertia still here in the Bronx, and we still deal with that. We still have the lowest unemployment rate. So for you to fix food insecurity, you really have to have a holistic approach and deal with all the issues, including poor education scores where our kids are lagging behind. All that combined brings you what we know as food insecurity. During the pandemic, again, we went into overdrive. Many of my colleagues, I gave out over 50,000 pounds of food, working with both public and private organizations. We worked with several churches like the Parkchester Baptist Church or the Virginia Avenue Mosque. Fresh Direct gave us a lot of food. Uber provided also through their meal recovery plan or takeout plan, where they give cooked food to people in our community. Uber Eats did a lot of that with us. So you have to have a combination of both private and public entities to impact food insecurity. But most of the work has to come from the government and funding, and continuing to fund agencies these not-for-profits that are doing the food pantries and are feeding our community, because they do a more effective way than government does. So one of the plan has to include providing more funding to these community-based organizations so they can help feed people. But again, like most issues that we have in this county, Daren, if we don't fix the unemployment problem, the educational score problems, and our health metrics, it's really a Band-Aid. If you fix those, you fix food insecurity.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the economic state right now of the district. When we talk about small businesses being affected because of COVID-19, they're the ones that really suffered the huge brunt of what went on. Give me a little bit about the small business look from a small business lens. How do you see small businesses recovering with such a hit?
Well, one of the things that we have done is we have visited well over 30 businesses in our district throughout the pandemic, and discussing some of the issues that individuals had with some of the relief programs and state programs and city programs that, one of the main reasons that they couldn't access was because they didn't have the correct bookkeeping. They didn't have correct tax information. They didn't have accounting measures in place. And as a result, only about less than 2% of small businesses in New York were able to benefit from federal relief plan. So one of the things that we have to do, and we're talking to them about, is having programs where we can educate these business owners, many of whom are immigrants, knowledge about how to maintain proper records, so you can get access to capital, access to funding from the state, from banks. So that's one of the main problems that we face. But look, we in the legislature, we put away about $800 million to help small businesses during the budget. And so I think that could have an impact. But it takes individuals in leadership like myself, individuals in business leaderships, positions, our crafts, our advocacy groups, to get people out there, get them educated, our small businesses, about correct bookkeeping and the resources that are available. Many of them don't know about loans that are available. So you have to have an aggressive approach so that they can access capital, they can access these kinds of programs and survive. And it's incredibly important that they do survive because small businesses are the backbone of our economy. They employ more people than anyone else. And to many, it's part of the immigrant story, Darren, where they came in here, family members of mine who own bodegas and moved on to other things. But that, those are industries, for example, that are very important in our communities. And so we have to protect them because without them, we don't have a healthy community to live in.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your environmental legislation. I know you're very proud of that, really dealing with the issue of the environment here in the borough of the Bronx and across New York State. For somebody who's not familiar with it, let's unpack it. And what does that really mean for the average person?
Well, we just passed historic legislation when it comes to the environment, and we're talking about protections and funding in place that you've never seen. We're going to prevent, for example, something that may appear trivial, but we're going to prevent hotels, for example, from using these small little bottles that they use for shampoo or conditioner, because they're a major environmental issue. We're going to provide information that's going to teach people about proper eating. And people say, well, what is that connection to the environment? Well, one thing has to do with the other. We're going to require vehicles that by 2035 have absolutely no emissions. Now that is monumental, because when you look at, for example, the Bronx, one of the biggest mistakes that we were left with, thank you, Robert Moses, was the Cross Bronx Expressway. It is a killer in our community. And so if you're going to have vehicles during rush hour, when that Cross Bronx Expressway becomes a parking lot, then if you cut emissions substantially to zero, then it's going to create less problems in our environment, less problems for our children who have the highest rate of asthma in the country, and other environmental impacts that it has. It's going to be mitigated considerably. So we're putting our money, the state legislature and the governor put our money, our mouth where our money was, and we make sure that we get things accomplished with the environment. And we're going to do that because what we've put together is historic, it's monumental. And I have no doubt that if done properly, it's going to improve the environmental health of this county.
All righty. I want to talk about something that's very near and dear to your heart, that you have announced that you're running for borough president. Of course, we know we haven't yet talked about it yet. So you're a candidate. So talk to us a little bit about the fact of why you decided that you wanted to run for borough president right here in the borough of the Bronx.
Well, I think the pandemic and my desire to do things differently are one of the main reasons why I think I should be the next borough president. We hit difficult times now. And of all the candidates that have announced, I have the most experience. I am the most progressive. I am the most prolific legislator, so I can get things done with the legislature that help this community. And I'm pro-choice. So, these are some of the factors that I want to bring to the table. Now, look, I have issues with the Bronx metrics. I've said it already with health metrics. We're last in terms of employment. We have the highest unemployment rate in the state of New York, one of the highest in the entire country. Our graduation rates, where the rest of the city hovers around 82 to 85%, we're at 66%. So that education gap continues year after year, generation after generation. So our kids are not getting the same level of education. And so I'm bringing new ideas to change these things. If you think about it, one of the concepts that I'm pushing is something called the 15-mile city. They're doing it in Europe, and that's where you can get your resources, education, governmental buildings, jobs, all within a 15-minute radius. That'll cut emissions, that'll bring more jobs to the area. You have to build infrastructure for it, so that'll bring more jobs. You have to have the experience. I have both the experience in the private sector as a person who ran businesses as an attorney, and experience in the public sector. I have the most experience of any of the other candidates that are running. And so under this crisis, under these times, you need someone with my experience, my ideas, fresh ideas, not get tied to the past. Look, some of my colleagues have ideas that we've tried. We've attempted to use some of these concepts, and they're just not working because we're still last on the important things and first in the worst things. So we have to change it. Now, I tell you this, Daren, I've challenged all of the candidates in this race to the following. If by the end of your last year as a borough president, if you're fortunate enough to get elected, and we are no longer last in unemployment rate, we are no longer last in healthcare indicators, and our graduation rate is not 80%, that I will not run for re-election. I've posed that challenge to all the other candidates, and all I hear is crickets. And I believe it's because probably they're not as confident in their plan to fix the Bronx as I am. So I have the experience, the knowledge, I have the working relationships with people. Think of this, Daren. I've passed the most progressive piece of legislation in the state in the last 25 years, something called the Green Light Bill, that allow undocumented immigrants the right to obtain driver's license. That was one of the toughest fights you could ever have as a legislator, but it's impacting about 750,000 New Yorkers. It's creating a better relationship with the community and the immigrant undocumented community. And all of the fear mongering that the New York State was going to go to hell and New York State was going to fall apart and illegal voters and undocumented immigrants registering to vote, all of that was just noise. The green light has been successful. So when you can pass those kinds of pieces of legislation, when you have the commitment that I have, when you come from this neighborhood, I come from poverty. My parents are poor. I was fortunate enough to get an education, to go to college and law school. But I understand what it is to be worried about your kids not getting a proper education. I understand what it is to go hungry when you come home. I understand a parent worrying about whether their son or daughter is going to make it back home. These are things that I've dealt with my entire life. I live in this community. I see it, and I try to work to make the lives of our residents better. And once I become the next borough president, you're going to see transformative changes in this county.
Do you believe that the unemployment rate can, according to your numbers, I mean, you can see a tremendous increase? I mean, how long before, under your plan, do you feel like rapid increase can be given to unemployment?
Well, look, you have to have fresh ideas. So let me tell you something that I did. In my delegation trips, I do delegation trips throughout the world. We get invited by leaders of government in other countries so that we can experience their cities and see if we can do some sort of coordinating of business or exchanges, cultural exchanges. I met with the number 2 person of Toshiba, which is one of the biggest engineering electronic companies in the world, trying to convince him to bring businesses as part of his company into the Bronx. And we're continuing this discussion. One of the things that he committed to me was to finance a STEM program for the students in this county. So you see, you have to be able to do things like this. You establish a relationship with Toshiba or any of the corporation, and you try to work to make it attractive for them to come to this county. Who knows, they can bring 5,000, 10,000 jobs into the Bronx. So if you don't have the experience working in the business sector, it's difficult sometimes to understand how you can work these concepts. But because I have the experience, I know I can do it. And so these are just a small portion of what I think I will do. But most importantly, Daren, you got to get that graduation rate up. You have to work on that. You have to provide free education. You know, we just froze CUNY and SUNY tuition for the next 3 years and gave the biggest investment in education when we increased foundation aid by $1.4 billion. That's going to bring an incredible amount of money to our educational system in needy schools. And so, you know, we have the ingredients to make it successful, but you have to have the right person cooking the meal, so to speak. And that's essentially what I can do. I can bring fresh ideas, I can bring experience and the ability to work with everyone to bring much needed resources, economic growth, educational growth into our county.
Well, we have to leave it there, Senator. And we thank you for joining us, Senator Louis Sepúlveda, joining us here on the Social Justice Forums. I want to thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, and hope to be on there again soon.
All righty. Well, we'll take a quick break. We got more show. Don't go anywhere. The Social Justice Forums will continue coming up in a few.